This time it's our road testing review of Triumph's Tiger 110. Now before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe, it really does help us create more content. Triumph's 650 Tiger 110 was introduced in 1953 and unsurprisingly was the result of demand from the American market. This was largely a result of Britain's poor financial position post World War II, and export to die was very much the clarion call to British industries. If you wanted steel to manufacture stuff, then 80% of all you made really needed to be going abroad, and Triumph of course focused on that all-important American market. The first results of this, of course, had been the Thunderbird of 1949, but the US market wanted something with a bit more go, and so in 1953, development of the Tiger 110 had been put in place. Not surprisingly, the first model was closely based on that year's Thunderbird, although there were some stylistic changes, using different badges and styling, etc. The engine was of 649cc and ran a bore stroke of 71 by 82mm, that's 2.8 by 3.23 inches. Compression ratio was 8.5 to 1, and there was a single AMAL carburettor. Some early models featured the iron head, similar to that of the Thunderbird, but an aluminium head was soon substituted. And the result of the changes was 40 horsepower at 6,500 rpm and a top speed of just over 100 miles an hour. There was telescopic forks at the front and swinging arm rear suspension from the beginning, although that chassis wasn't exactly the most rigid. The bars were a bit lower than those of the Thunderbird, but the riding position was comfortable. The seat was at 31 inches or 79 centimetres and was tapered at the front, making the machine fairly accessible to shorter riders. The bike of course used drum brakes, with an 8-incher on the front and a 7-incher on the back, and by the standards of the period these were pretty effective. Other equipment was fairly standard for the period, that's 19-inch wheels front and rear, and 4-speed transmission with Triumph's traditional up-for-up gear pattern. The stylish fuel tank incorporated the usual Triumph parcel rack, and carried around 4 UK gallons of fuel, that's 4.8 US gallons or just over 18 litres, while oil capacity was around 3 pints or 2.8 litres. 1956 would see a revamp of the design, with changes to the top end including new camshafts, and these would result in an extra couple of horsepower on the top end, giving the top speed as tested for this model of 109 miles an hour, and so performance finally matched that Tiger 110 moniker. The 110 remained in production until 1961, when it was effectively replaced by the TR6 Trophy.
Right. The Tiger 110. So was of course the sporting Triumph for the advent of the Bonneville in late 58, early 59. And yeah, a lovely machine to ride. Quite a contrast to the Royal Enfield. One thing you do notice is that it probably feels a bit more light and flickable, but what I would say, certainly at low speed manoeuvring, is the chassis doesn't feel as assured as the Royal Enfield one does. It feels a bit more vague, which is perhaps to some level of expectation, because you don't expect that from Triumphs of this age. You know, the early swinging arm chassis weren't renowned for their superb handling. But overall, I mean, they're reasonably competent. I mean, at the end of the day, these bikes did pretty well at the Thruxton 500 races back in the day, so they're not terrible, but they does feel a bit more flexy and a little bit less assured, less stable than that Royal Enfield does. Seats reasonably comfortable. It's narrower than on the Royal Enfield. It doesn't cushion you as well. Suspension's a bit more crashy over these bumps, though these bumps are quite a test for any suspension. They're very harsh bumps that we're going over now, so it's a good way of testing the suspension setup. And it is more crashy on the Triumph, which you'll probably expect. It's a more sporty model after all. This was a 110 mile an hour motorbike. I'm genuinely pretty much capable of 110 too, so You know, these things didn't hang around. Turner, of course, envisaged these bikes very much as a sports tourer. He was not somebody that was heavily into competition, so he pushed these as a sports tourer. And that's a pretty good way of seeing him. The engine's pretty strong. Pretty smooth, actually, as well. No excessive vibration, certainly at these lower speeds. And decent low down torque. I think the Royal Enfield probably has the initial torque advantage, but then this is a more tuned engine, although it's still a single carb unit. It's designed much more with sporting in mind. You've got the aluminium head, which the Royal Enfield has too, but you've got the alley head, and really most of the setup for this bike is as per the Bonneville. The only real obvious difference, of course, being the number of carbs. This is a single carb engine. Huge, not a huge difference in performance. You know, there's about 5 horsepower, if that, but that's mostly at the top end. I think low down, you don't notice a huge difference between the 110 and the Bonneville, and indeed in overall performance. They're not dissimilar at all. So again, quite a civilised little machine, this. Not excessively loud to sit on. I mean, there's notice of the Royal Enfield sounds quite meaty when you're behind it, but it's quite quiet when you're sitting on it. And similar to this bike, actually. It's fairly smooth and civilised, which is exactly what Turner was going for. And that sort of smoothness is sort of amplified by the nacelle front end, which looks rather natty, I think. It's very stylish sort of clocks. It's not necessarily perfectly angled. In the sun, I think the clocks wouldn't necessarily be that easy to see. But overall, not too bad at all, actually. Again, it's that sporty rather than racy riding position. If you remember our road test on the Veloset, this is a very different machine than that. Bars are nice and low. A little bit narrow. But overall, a comfortable riding position, I would say. Feet are quite far forward. Very typically British in its general setup. Gearbox obviously is an up for up, as per Triumph pattern. A lot of people used down for up back then. The Royal Enfield BSA's per unit twins were down for up, and it's very common because it's generally the racing pattern, down for up, and still is today. Grand Prix bikes still use down for up gearboxes, so you can change up gear while you're cranked over, basically. You don't have to get your foot underneath. Yeah, I don't think it has quite the low down surge of the Enfield, but that's obviously offset by the superior top end surge. Brakes are reasonable. The back brake, I'd say the brakes are, because it's a more sporty model, perhaps not surprised, the brakes are superior to the Royal Enfields. So they're not bad brakes. Back brake in particular is quite strong, actually. It feels pretty good. Definitely feels some sort of braking force coming back at you. Good feedback, so not a bad brake. Clutch is fairly standard. It's not too heavy at all. Nice in operation, gives a good feel. This particular one's had a new clutch put in it, and you can tell actually it's working very nicely. Again, gear change is perhaps a little bit low for my feet, but again that's adjustable, so not a huge problem. And it snicks in very nicely, actually. It's a nice sort of positive gearbox, the Triumph gearbox. It's probably inferior to BSA's down for up gearbox of the period, but that's one of the best gearboxes I think I've ever used. It's an absolutely marvellous sort of gearbox on the A10s. But this is still a pretty good gearbox. It's nice and positive. You can hear it snicking in quite nicely. You can feel it rather snicking in quite nicely. So overall, a nice gear change. Nothing wrong with this gear change at all. Very nice. So yeah, overall, so far so good. Do you have to remember that the gear change is now reversed, of course, We are now down for down. And just remember that for the rest of the ride. I shall be just fine. I don't really know why Triumph used what is today the conventional gear change. It wasn't necessarily the convention back then amongst British companies. If I remember rightly, I think the hand change ran basically in the same direction as the first foot changes were essentially modifications to the hand changes. That's probably not surprising that they just carried on going. I think if you've got a gear change in a particular way on your models, you're not suddenly going to, unless you've got to, you're not suddenly going to change, mainly because the your customers expect the gear change in a particular setup. Throttle a little heavy. It's a single carb, quite a strong spring. It's quite a big bore carb, obviously, because this being the sporty model. Up to about 50, pretty smooth. A little bit of vibration through the pegs, but as there's enough to write home from at the minute, not really done sufficient, not really pushed it to really find out properly. Yeah, looks like crunch on the gear change there. Yeah, very different machine. The whole feel is surprisingly different. Everybody thinks that all British twins are going to feel the same, but they really don't. Okay. Let's see, can we keep that? Can we keep that for him? Here we go. So on some fast sweepers now, and yeah, not too bad actually. It does feel like she's a little bit bouncy. Suspension's not too bad, but it does feel a bit bouncy through some of these corners. We're not going fast enough really to experience the notorious whip. I suppose it should be okay. Yeah, well, fuck response quite different on this bike to the Enfield. There's definitely less in the low and mid range. But then, you know, there is no win-win in anything engineering in particular, really. If you want more low down, that you're probably going to lose out on the top. All things being equal, if you're looking at the same capacity and same general technology. Generally with Triumph engines, it's said that the pre-units are smoother running than the unit engines. I think that's true to an extent. I mean, the Tiger 100 is pretty smooth. Anyway, the later units are not that smooth, but then you're not measuring like for like, because obviously they were trying to extract more power by that point. I can't remember if he said it was a slack or a tight wire advance. Seems to be pulling all right. I'll leave it around the middle. At around 60 there, you can, particularly under acceleration, just get a little bit of a buzz comes through the seat. But again, nothing excessive. Bars, very little. Grip the tank tightly with your knees, you can feel some vibration. A little bit through the pegs. But again, it's pretty smooth actually. Not unpleasant. Styling on these Triumphs, I think where Turner's real genius lay was in styling, really. And this is a great example. It's a slightly more staid look than the, you know, sort of 62 Bonnie. Slightly more conservative sports toury look. You know, the mudguards are quite well balanced, that sort of thing, and they've got this lovely swoopy clock setup, which of course you won't get later on because they went to dual clocks, didn't they? And a chrome headlamp, which looks more sporty and does look better. But nevertheless, this is not an unattractive setup on this bike. It's a pretty bike. The clocks look nice. The whole lot, I think, blends in very nice and it looks very smooth. It's always a very nice sound to Triumph engines. Probably a lot to do with valve timing, but they do make a nice sound. There's a little getting away from that, they really do. And the Tiger 100 head is a beautiful example of that. Because by gum, that is just sensationally good sound. It's not as nice, it's a bit more subdued, but it's still a lovely sound. You know, and it's easy to see why Triumph were so successful in this period. They've got nice, swoopy, aerodynamic style. I mean, it's a period. Some people will say there was a slight scooter influence with these sort of designs around the clocks, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I think if you look at companies like CZ and Yauer, they were putting sort of similar style designs around. And then, of course, if you look at the cars of the period, there's a beginning to come sort of an American influence on car design. You've got these swoopy, voluptuous designs overall. Obviously, Triumph at this point are trying to sell their bikes mostly to the American market. They realised that with the decline in the British market, you better start selling in America. And it was a tactic that worked very well for them for a number of years. Consequently, they designed things to appeal to the Americans. I mean, this early one, slightly less so. You've still got this very 50s sort of swoopy styling, which is very nice, I have to say. You've got the big badges on the side of the bikes, the sort of jukebox style badges are starting to come in now. And generally, the sort of Americana is very much the way of the world in terms of styling. It was the direction of travel for styling, definitely at this point. And why not, really? You know, the British quite liked it, because even cars in Britain were starting to look slightly more American by this point. But why not? You know, Britain sort of post-war was very staid. There's very much a sort of grey period for Britain, really. So as they're getting to a point now where people are starting to be able to afford new things, having that American influence, America being associated with, you know, with wealth and power and all those good things, you know, not unsurprisingly, people wanted their bikes in this particular style. You know, people liked those sort of pastel shades. This one isn't. You've got this nice sort of slightly off-white top with a sort of black around, and it is very beautiful. Turner's styling was just amazing, you know. Even for something as humble as the Thunderbird, you've got that lovely grill-shaped design on the tank. It's very nice. Yeah, definitely feels more vague. Sounds okay actually, but you don't get the same level of feedback that you do in the Royal Enfield or on my A10 or something like that. It is a bit more vague, definitely. One of the problems they had really was that Triumph generally tried to build the frames nice and light. Makes them nice and nimble. Doesn't make them flex a bit though. It's not so much a problem at these sort of speeds. When you try to push them really hard, the bracing, particularly around the swinging arm, wasn't the best, and they could flex quite a bit. But for a modern rider, that's probably not really important. Most people are not going to buy these bikes and ride them like they were teenagers, are they? You know, they've got any sense. They're going to ride them sensibly. And given that most people are just going to bimble around on these things, actually, you know, this chassis is perfectly up to the job. Does give you slightly weird feedback though, I have to say. I think from an engine point of view, I think that it's a good engine. Don't get me wrong, it's a lovely smooth motor. I actually prefer the Royal Enfield one. I think the styling on the Triumph is a million. I mean, when it came down to it, there's not a huge amount between a lot of these bikes. The various British twins, they're all pretty good really. And styling was a big part of it, and Triumph styling was leagues ahead of anything else. I mean, this bike is a lot prettier than say the Enfields or the AMCs or the BSAs. It was really, really good. Yeah, I think at normal riding speeds, this chassis is okay actually. At the end of the day, you know, you wouldn't go club racing on the thing, would you? Well, I wouldn't.
Whatever bikes or collections bikes would you like to see us cover in a future video? Maybe you got a bike we can use for a test ride? Either way, get in touch below. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.